freedom, freedom over fame, freedom over cycle stays the same.
Welcome. First of all, welcome. This is Unsolicited Perspectives, and I'm your host, Bruce Anthony. Thank you for listening and watching wherever you get your podcasts and video podcasts. Subscribe, share, like, comment, and rate us. You can find us on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitch at unsolicited_perspectives. You can find us on Twitter and TikTok at unsolicited_PER. Watch us live. Now, watch us live every Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Twitch and YouTube. Our audience continues to grow with each and every episode, and I humbly thank you.
On today's episode, I'll be interviewing Heather O'Connor. She's a family lawyer and divorce lawyer in Massachusetts. We'll be talking about her life, skating, domestic violence, and divorce. But first things first. So I'm going to be interviewing Heather O'Connor, and I'm going to apologize for those people that are watching the video. There's going to be a little bit of what's called lip flap. The reception wasn't that great, but the audio, there won't be a problem with the audio. And the video catches up. It goes back and forth. But the interview is very good. Heather has a very interesting life. I know that you guys know that I'm not shy talking about my divorce. 50% of the marriages end up in divorce. I'm cool from it. I don't really have any lingering effects from it. I know a lot of people that are either divorced or are going through a divorce. So this is really interesting to interview Heather and just talk about her life, because once again, she has a very fascinating life. And then hear a little bit more about divorce and divorce proceedings and the backgrounds of family law. So without further ado, let's get to the interview. Hello, and I'm here with Heather O'Connor. She's a domestic violence survivor, former professional skater, mother, lawyer, and just so I throw that out there, grandmother as well. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure having you here. I'm excited to interview you because you have such a fascinating life. But I want to start from the beginning.
Okay.
Skating. Tell me all about that. Tell me about getting started, wanting to become an Olympic skater, and falling a little short of becoming an Olympic skater. Give me the whole backstory on that.
Sure. So basically, it started, my parents had no money. You know, we grew up in a household when I was little, we didn't even have a car. We had to walk everywhere and take the bus. And my parents were looking for a free activity to be able to take me and my brother to. And there was an advertisement for a free skating show. And they were like, oh, we'll take the kids to that. Well, we went to this free show and I fell in love, and it ended up with my mom having to work 3 jobs, my dad working 2 jobs, to help pay for it. So it was really something I had no business being in, but I had a passion for it. I loved it. I was really, really good at it. Like, I took to it right away, and, my skill increased quickly. I moved away from home when I was about 12 to continue training. I actually trained with Nancy Kerrigan and Paul Wiley. And so, so that's what I did up until my senior year of high school, where I decided that, I wanted to do normal kid stuff. I had had a couple really bad ankle injuries at that point, and I wanted to go to prom. I wanted to do gym at school. And so we kind of transitioned. It was a big deal in my household because my parents had put a lot into something that now I was just throwing away. So it was hard, but that's where I went. And I turned from there. After I graduated, I started teaching figure skating. And then I did get back into competing again after I actually was married and had my first child. Then that part of my career ended because I found out I was pregnant with my second child. So that's pretty much the skating story.
Okay, so we'll definitely get to the marriage because I know
Okay.
that's the next transition or in your life. You go from skating to your marriage. But Nancy Kerrigan, I mean, this was obviously after the whole
This
incident.
no, this was during. So I was training
Oh,
with her when all that happened, and I never met Tanya Harding or anything like that, but I remember the news cameras being all over the rink we trained at. They were trying to climb in the roof. Like it was an incredibly chaotic period of time. But yeah, no, we trained all during that.
and how did you deal with all of that going around you?
The same way you deal with anything, when you're a competitive athlete or you're really focused on something, you just put on your blinders like a horse and you don't see anything else and you just do what you got to do.
Okay. All right, so I'm interested in the ending of your skating career and you deciding that you want to have a life because I had a similar experience. I was a Some friends of mine will say I was a decent basketball player. Other people that have known me for years will say I was really good. And in college, I had an opportunity to play, and I knew a couple of guys on the basketball team, and I said, I don't want that life. So I knew at that point I didn't love it, that I liked it. Was that something similar that you had where you were like, yeah, I really like this. I don't know if I love it because I want to live a life. I want to have fun.
Yeah, I think when I was younger, it was something, I wanted to eat, breathe, sleep. Everything was figure skating.
Hmm.
But then, as I had the injuries, especially the last major ankle injury I had that took me out of, a competition that I was supposed to win. I was supposed, that's what I was tagged, that's what was expected. Had a really horrible ankle injury right before it. And after that, it was like, the chances of me making it now at this point are so slim that
Hmm.
I want to just be a kid. Like I just want to enjoy high school, for the last half year that I can.
I can definitely understand that. So before we get to your marriage, and then we'll dig deeper into your career in law. Do you think that becoming a professional skater and teaching prepared you for law?
Um, I think I don't know if the teaching aspect of it, maybe in relation to having to explain things to younger kids and be able to take more difficult concepts and simplify them, maybe that area. But I definitely think there were mornings I was up at 4 a.m. I was you know we had tutoring, or we were in school for only a partial day, so everything was so regimented and focused that I
Hmm.
think that 100% helped me through law school, definitely. And then I think also with the demand of being a lawyer and everything that's expected of you, I think that definitely helped put me in a better position.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. So we're transitioning now from your figure skating career to your marriage.
Okay.
And you said that that effectively ended the teaching aspect of figure skating because you
Not
weren't pregnant one time, but twice.
Yeah, so I actually have three kids, so I ended up getting pregnant three times. But it wasn't necessarily that the marriage ended my career. I had actually moved out to the UP area of Michigan and Wisconsin, and I had moved out there to train.
Hmm.
The guy who I was dating at the time came with me because he was going to play hockey while we were out there.
Okay.
And during this period of time, oh, great, I'm pregnant. What are we going to do now? Oh, we're going to get married because that's what's expected of us. And
Yeah.
so that kind of led to the marriage, but I was still teaching,
Mm,
throughout that whole period.
okay. Can you tell me a little bit about your ex-husband? Because obviously you got married and you got a divorce, but your ex-husband, the history of you guys and that whole transition of moving out there, getting pregnant, deciding to get married, and then what the actual marriage was like.
Yeah, I try to be very careful when I speak of this because of the fact that he is still my children's father.
Understand.
And I never, there's a lot that they know. There's probably quite a bit that they don't, and they don't need to. And I know
Exactly.
they're very active on my social medias and everything like that. So I want to be very careful, and there's probably going to be things that I definitely leave out for their protection.
Hmm.
But I think, to summarize, there were quite a few red flags that I should have seen that I was blinded to, partly because I was terrified of letting my family down because of the fact I
Mm,
was pregnant, without first being married. So
yeah.
that was a whole thing, because I grew up very, very religious, where that's not what you do,
Yeah.
and it was extremely, you weren't a good person if you were getting pregnant before you got married. So there was that whole thing. So I think I ignored a lot of things that now I look back and I say, what were you thinking? But at that point in time, I think because of my objective of protecting, myself, my family, and my child that was going to be coming, I ignored a lot. And then as the marriage continued, because when I committed to marriage, regardless, I was very young. I was 20 when I got married, 21 when I had my daughter.
Hmm.
And I was very committed to marriage. I had grown up with the ideology that when you get married, that's for life. You put everything into that marriage. You commit yourself to that marriage, regardless of anything that happens. You stay married and you work it out.
Yeah.
And so that was how I went into the marriage. And again, along the lines, there were quite a few things. The first time there was a domestic incident that was blatant, that couldn't just be, oh, maybe got carried away, blah, blah, blah,
Hmm.
was the night before my daughter's second birthday.
Mm.
And it was the point. I remember I took both my kids, because I had two at that point. I took both my kids, I got into the car, and I was going to leave.
Mhm.
That was a line that got crossed for me. And my elderly neighbor actually came out. She saw me in the car crying, and she came out and she said, "What are you doing? These are your kids. This is your family. You can't leave your family." And that was everything I had been told my entire life.
Yeah.
So I went back in the house, put on a lot of makeup, and pretended nothing happened. And things like that continued to happen, not so frequently that it was an everyday occurrence, but frequently enough where it became a pattern. And so I learned a lot after the fact of the things that I had been through and the cycle of domestic violence. But while you're going through it, you're not thinking about that. You're just thinking about, how do I get through, everything that's going on? How do I not make the person upset so we don't have to deal with it? And it actually almost becomes where you feel like it's your fault if you didn't do the things right that
Yeah.
prevented the other person from getting upset.
Yeah.
So, that there were definitely good parts of our marriage, because
Mhm.
if it was all bad, I think nobody would stay. But
Right.
there were good things, there were bad things, and eventually, it ended with him getting arrested, after he attempted to strangle me. So,
I think that'll do it. Okay. Wow. So I don't want to ask too many probing questions because, like you said, you don't want to. There are certain things that you don't want to talk about. So we'll just frame it as this was more than a toxic marriage. This was a domestic violence marriage, and so my question would be, how did your personal experience being in this marriage shape the way you approach family law?
sure. So at that point, I had never gone to college. So I only had a high school diploma. I had turned to coaching, which, I had all the experience I needed for that. I didn't have to go back to school for that.
Hmm.
So it was actually, during the period of time that my husband was arrested, my oldest son, he's my middle child, but he's my oldest son. He was running around the yard, just skipping, saying, "My daddy got arrested. My daddy got arrested." And the police came to me and said, "Ma'am, we want to speak with your son, because this isn't typically how children are acting
Hmm.
when their parents getting arrested in front of them." So they took my son aside and they spoke with him. And then they came back to me and they said, "Ma'am, we want to let you know we're going to be filing a 51A, which is what we refer to here as the initial complaint to social services. And they said, because of the fact that when we asked your son if he knew why his father was getting arrested, his response was, yes, he hurt my mommy like he hurts us. And that, for me, when I heard that, it took probably about a month for me to really work up the courage, because my husband has also told me that if I ever left him, that he would take everything from me. He would take my children. He would take, all the money, that I would be lucky enough to even be sleeping on a park bench at night. And I believed him. I believed what he said. And so I was terrified, but it was finding out that my children were being affected was what I don't want to say gave me the courage, but I knew there was no return. And that was when I filed for divorce. So through that process, I wasn't an attorney. I knew nothing about it. I had never been involved in the law. And through that, what I saw was, one, a lot of things that I felt were unjust within the system and I didn't understand. I had had a number of conversations with other people as you sit in court. And I remember one conversation I had with a woman specifically where we were talking back and forth, and we both had, similar stories of feeling as though our attorneys, they seem to know the legal mumbo jumbo. They seemed to know what they were talking about, but they just didn't get it. And it was that word it, that I went home that night and I remember laying up, looking at the ceiling, thinking, what is it that I feel that the lawyer's not getting? And it finally hit me where it's the emotional side of what you're going through. It's the ups and the downs. And, at one point you're feeling ecstatic because you're looking at having a completely different life that you can make into something wonderful. And then in the very next moment, you're crying on the floor because your life as you knew it is over and you don't know what you're going to do. It's a feeling of extreme fear of the unknown. It's a feeling of joy of letting go of a past that wasn't happy. There's 101 different things that you go through that the lawyer just didn't understand and treated it just as if it was any other case. And it's not. Nobody going through a divorce or family law, you can have very similar circumstances, but those cases are very different because there's very different people. And it was that. And I remember sitting there saying, I think I can do this better than what I'm seeing out there. And my lawyer at one point said, Heather, you've got 3 kids. So all my kids were under the age of 6 when I went through my divorce. And so he said, you've got some really young kids here. What are you going to do to support them? And I remember looking at him, I said, well, I'm going to go back to school, and then I'm going to go to law school, and then I'm going to be an attorney, and I'm going to open my own family law firm, and I'm going to do this. He literally laughed at me and thought I was joking, 100% thought I was joking. And then I could see the look, the realization in his face drip down as he realized, oh no, she is not joking. And he goes, Heather, do you have any idea what you would be getting into? And I was like, nope, but I'll figure it out. And so that's what I did. I started back to community college. Then I went to undergrad. Then I went to law school. Then I clerked for 2 years. Then I joined a firm and got a lot of experience. And then I opened my own firm in 2016.
Now, how old were you when you started this process?
So when I first started back to school, it was in 2004. So I'd have to do some math. So I think I was around 27 or 28.
Okay. Wow.
Maybe 26.
Okay.
But somewhere in there.
Okay.
I think 26 because I think I was 28 when I graduated community college.
That would make sense. Yeah, it would make sense because it's typically a 2-year situation. Okay, so before we get to your law career, I have to ask you, what advice would you give individuals who are considering leaving toxic relationships or domestic abuse relationships. I say toxic, but it's domestic abuse, which is still toxic. Um, but are what advice would you give to those people that are trying to leave those relationships but are afraid of the financial and the emotional consequences of leaving that relationship? Because you did it.
I did it. And, I remember thinking, look, I don't really, besides figure skating, which at that point in time, the economy had crashed. So I went from coaching quite a bit to the first thing people do when the money's
Hmm.
tight is get rid of extracurricular activities. So
Right.
I went from coaching quite a bit to very, very limited and not enough to really support a family on. And so for me, it was, how do I make money in the interim? Or if I'm not going back to school, because this is also a period of time where I thought just if you were a lawyer, you would be rich, which is not necessarily true, but that's what I thought.
The- I will say, when you become a lawyer, you have debt.
Yes, which I didn't think that part through.
Right. Yeah.
But I kind of thought, if I can make it as a lawyer, I'll be rich. And I'd rather work my ass off basically for 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, and eventually know that I can be there versus continuing to struggle to make ends meet forever.
Hmm.
Because nobody's going to give me money. Nobody's going to throw money at me. We didn't have a lot of money during our marriage, and my ex sucked at paying child support. So I couldn't even
Right.
rely on that. And so for me, my mindset was I could either struggle forever or I can struggle and take control of my future. And that's what I did. And I think, for people going through it, if you can come to that resolve of taking your future and not waiting for somebody to give something to you or waiting for the right opportune time, there's never going to be the right opportune time. And
Hmm.
the longer you stay in a situation like that, the more you start to suffocate and you drowned there, and it becomes even harder to get out.
Um, what did you do for a living as you're putting yourself through school? Because I'm going to, I don't need to know your financials, but I'm going to assume that you took out school loans, right? But you also have 3 kids, and you mentioned that your ex was piss poor at paying child support. So, what were some of the things that you did? Because putting yourself through school, even with loans, and they just don't cover everything that you need. Never mind the fact that you got a family and kids to raise. What did you do to make ends meet?
Yeah, I mean, I bartended, I waitressed, but I also knew that if I could get really good grades, I could get scholarships.
There
And
you go.
so
Yeah.
I made it a point where an A, I wasn't going to settle for an A. I needed an A plus. I needed to be top of my class because one, I knew I had my age against me, and I knew the fact that I had 3 kids working against me. Where you have to apply to get into law school. I don't know what they're going to look at, and they're going to say, "Whoa, she's older and she's got children." She's a question mark. So I knew I needed to set myself up well. And so for community college, thankfully, because of the fact I was divorced and I had 3 kids, I did qualify for a number of grants that I
Mm,
didn't have to repay.
good.
And then what I ended up also doing is because you can take out school loans that if you don't need it to pay for school, you can utilize for your living expenses. And so my debt, I ended up, community college was mostly paid for through grants. Through undergrad, I had a full scholarship, so I
Okay.
didn't pay anything for that, but I did take out all the money to live off of.
Yeah.
And then when I got to law school, I got a very significant scholarship in law school, but it was the same thing. I took out quite a bit of money to live and subsidize what I was earning as a bartender.
Okay. You brought up something, and I don't know even know why I didn't think of this ahead of time. Obviously, you're an older person in the classroom with younger people, and I remember being in college, and there would be an older person. I remember distinctly there was this woman. She wasn't much older than I was, but she had a kid and the whole nine. What was the reaction from the other students? Knowing your story, obviously they didn't know all the details of the story, but they knew that you were a mother with 3 kids and that you were older than them. did they treat you any type of way because of that difference?
I think the one thing I did, and I don't want to sound conceited with this coming off, but I've always looked much younger than I am.
You
And
do.
even when when I was 28, I still looked like I was 21. I think I got carded up until maybe 5 years ago. So I looked very young. So I think nobody would have known until they started talking to me, or like we were having a friendship, or my life story just came out. If you were just looking, you might think, hey, she's a little bit older than the people, but it wasn't that significant, immediate assumption that I was older in most of the situations. I think for a lot of people that did know, there was a lot of mutual respect. I think that I became friends with a lot of people that were going through school. I'm still followed by a lot of people that I went to undergrad with throughout my social media. We've been friends in real life. They send clients to me. There was where they saw a drive. I wasn't just sitting back and to get through school. Like, I was that person who everyone hated because the teacher would be like, any other questions? And I'd be like, I have one. Like, I need to know everything because I need my grades.
Right.
And so I don't think that I had that level of difficulty. I do remember in law school, my first year, because first year law school is like nothing you can prepare for. It is exhausting. And I knew going into it that with my 3 kids, you never know when somebody's going to get sick. You never know when the school's going to call to come pick your kid up because they're having a bad day at school. You never know what's going to happen. So I couldn't act like the other students and just stay on top of my work. I had to be ahead of my work. So I remember one day, I think I hadn't slept all night because one of my kids were sick or something. I forget exactly the reason, but I hadn't slept. And I'm in class, and this girl behind me is complaining about, how she has this little dog that keeps her from doing her work because it barks at her and she's got to take it to the dog park, and, she couldn't get her work done. And I turned around. I was like, if I hear one more effing thing about your goddamn dog.
Because you're sitting there dealing with real problems, and she's
Meanwhile,
sitting
like,
here.
I'm cleaning puke up all night and I still have to be to class,
Right.
And so I lost it a little bit. We weren't friends the rest of that year. We did make up later. But
You should have invited her over to clean up some of that puke. Okay, Heather. So I've dug all into your personal life and maybe got a little too personal, but I think it's good content, and I'm very appreciative of you being so open. So thank you.
You're welcome. I also think it's very important for people to know that they're not alone when they're going through things like that. And so, as I said, I want to protect some of it for my children, but
Exactly.
I also do believe that it is so important to share. If you've been through something like that, I think you almost have a duty to give back and help other people out of it.
Speaking of your duty, that's an excellent segue. All right. Speaking of your duty as a lawyer, what do you believe are the most important qualities of being a successful lawyer? And how do you cultivate those qualities, not only in yourself, but also in your team? Because, by the way, in case I didn't point that out, Heather has a kick ass law firm.
It's so true. I'm a little biased, because I've built it and I own it. But I do. I think we have an absolutely amazing team, and it started with a vision that just continues to grow. So I think to answer your multi-questioned
I know I do
question
that.
there.
Yeah, I do that a lot.
To start with, I think what makes a successful lawyer, and some of that is going to define how somebody defines success in and of itself. Somebody might think, and I know there's a general perception of lawyers that they will do anything they can for $1. And a lot of times that dollar comes with winning, so they're willing to hurt people to be able to get that dollar and get that win. That is not what I consider success. I consider success being, especially in my field of family law, I consider it to make sure that you understand where a person's coming from, that you are guiding them and letting them understand the choices that they have, so that they have the ability to, and the education behind them, to make the choices that are going to affect their life. Then it's also making sure that you're representing them to the best of your ability, both in the law, both in the way you argue, and while always looking for a way to negotiate and get them out of the system as quickly as possible. Well, being able to strategize looking forward in case you are not able to do that, so that you can kill the other side in court and get the outcome for your client that you're looking for. But there's so many different directions, and it's part of why I love this area, because it's not black and white. There's always 50,000 different ways you can go. And I think success is doing the best job for your client in the shortest amount of time, and having that client leave with, regardless, I've had cases, I hate to admit it, but it's true. I'd be lying to say otherwise. I've had cases that did not come out the way that I was hoping. But my client has stood there and said, I get it. And no, I don't like the result, but you fought for me. You heard me, you understood me. And, there's been a friendship that's formed from that. And to me, that's success. Success is when somebody goes, regardless of their outcome, and says, if you're going to hire somebody, this is where you want to go, because they listen and they do what they say. And for me, that's what defines success. So I think that's to answer that part.
Yeah. So it seems like to me, in everything that you just said and everything that you said in the first segment about when you were going through this, is that it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, you literally put yourself in their shoes. And it's a constant reminder of what you went through to make sure I don't want to make them feel like that it is missing.
Right. And the hard part, I know I'm very good at that. I know I can do that. And the hardest part also being, an A-type personality, red color, is my personality. I'm very much a control freak in a lot of ways. Passing that off as I build a team was something that I had to go through a lot of mind shifting and a lot of letting go, not of the expectation I have of people, but of the fact that at the very beginning it was, I know I can do it right, so I want to do it all.
Right.
But in order to grow, in order to, service the number of people that I want to be able to, so that they all get that same level, it's been this building process and this growth process of having people come in and making sure that they understand our vision and our goals, making sure they understand how to make that connection. And, when I'm hiring, I'm always looking for people that have some sort of life experience with family law, not just that they went to school and, they haven't had that experience. I think pretty much everyone on our team, whether it's been them as a child, whether it's been them as an adult, whether it's been, a spouse of theirs that has gone through the system, they all have something that they can relate to with family law. And that's been very, very important to me.
That's dope. That's really dope. Okay, so in dealing with family law and divorce law, what are some common misconceptions that you encounter with your work, and how do you help these clients overcome these misconceptions?
I think, the biggest one is that mom always gets the kids. I don't think that's necessarily true in most cases anymore.
Really?
I think, at least in Massachusetts. So I'm licensed in Massachusetts. I practice in Massachusetts. I'm also licensed in Rhode Island. But whenever I talk about law, I focus on Massachusetts because that's where we do the majority of our work. And here, I think there has been a lot of growth towards fathers. But I also think here, a lot of fathers have stepped up during the relationship. And there's a number of dads who are now the primary caretaker during the relationship, which you didn't have before. And it's one of the things that I would like to see change in our society as a whole is, and I understand it, because if one person has a better job and the other person doesn't have as many career advancements, it makes financial sense for that person to be the one that runs the kids around, that takes time off from work.
Exactly.
But if you want equality with when the relationship ends, put your work in while you're still together. Make sure that you're also, as dad, taking time off to take care of the kids if there's a snow day. And I think that would change a lot throughout other jurisdictions, I do think Massachusetts has come a far way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, depending on who you talk to, there's a lot of guys out there that would probably say something different. But in my practice, that's what I've seen. You know, for the most part, if dad wants a substantial role in their child's life, even if it's not a full 50-50, they get that opportunity.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm not going to throw my friend under the bus, but I know I have a friend that got a divorce, um, and I guess his ex-wife made more money because he got, I guess, primary custody and he got child support. And it was literally the first time I'd ever heard anything like that. I was like, wait
Mm-hmm.
a minute, the man can get child support?
Yep.
Like,
And
especially if it's
alimony
not like
now.
Oprah, like if it's not Oprah, right? If it's not Oprah, or who else is somebody really rich? Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, if she gets remarried and they have kids or whatever, I would
Yep.
expect something like that. But this was like normal average people, and he got child support. And
Yep.
I said, I don't know how you pulled that one off. So that's a misconception, is that, yeah, the woman always gets everything. And there's also a little bit of toxic masculinity that goes along with that, thinking that women always get everything and she's going to take half. And that's
Yep.
that, yeah, but we don't need to go there about toxic masculinity. Yeah, okay.
I think some of that too also unfortunately depends on who you choose as a lawyer. You know, I
Mm,
know that I won't throw anyone under the bus, but I can think of one lawyer specifically who, when he's dealing with a male client, he scares them into agreeing to give away a lot more than they should. And I've had cases where they come to us later and I look at it and I'm like, why? Why did you do this? But
right.
you can't usually undo what's already been done. You know, we've
Hmm.
been able to do that in some cases, but there's others, especially if you're talking about a property distribution. Once it's done, it's done. You can't go back and fix it. So, as much as I'd love to say, you know, every lawyer out there is great, they're not. There's a lot of lawyers that are good and will guide you in the right way, but
Uh-huh.
there's some that unfortunately, you know, guide people in a very wrong direction.
So that leads me to a different question. What are, if you could, what are some things that people who are looking for lawyers, family dispute, divorce, what have you, what are questions that they can ask lawyers to find out, is this lawyer going to really give me the best advice? And are there even questions like maybe trigger answers to questions that a lawyer would say, and that client would say, nah, you know what? I don't know about this lawyer. They're going to tell me to sign away everything. So are
Yep.
there questions that a client can ask a lawyer to get that information out beforehand?
Yeah, I think, you know, one is usually a communication issue. And right from the beginning, if you're having trouble getting in touch with a law firm, like when you're hiring them, they should be on their best, you know, appearance, their best behavior, really.
Mhm.
And if they're already not responding to you quickly in there, it's only likely going to be worse. You know,
Right.
another thing that I think is important to ask, if you go in and you say, I want the kids, I want the house, I want retirement, I want alimony, I want it all. And they say, okay, yeah, I can get that for you 100%. They're full of crap and you should run, 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 run. You
Mhm.
know, and even if sometimes, you know, you're going through the case. So let's say I hired somebody and then I start questioning, you know, that advice. Feel free to contact another attorney, and usually you can set up like an hour consultation just to go through and see if that attorney might have any feedback on what they might do differently, or you know what has been done. And you got to be careful there because you know attorneys can try to undercut the other person. But if you really believe in your heart that you know you're being told information that just isn't sitting well with you, double check it with somebody else. And also look at their website. You know, what is their focus on their website? Are they giving away information? Because you know attorneys should want to educate people who aren't even hiring them. So
Mm.
if their website isn't set up in a way where they are giving the information for people who, if they need to do things themselves, they're putting themselves in a good direction, that attorney is not going to educate you correctly.
Mm.
So I think those are a few. I know our intakes coordinator, she's actually done a lot of talks about these exact things, because it is really important for somebody to know what they're getting into, and nobody knows until they're already there, and that's
Right.
part of the problem.
Okay. So that's good advice. Y'all listen out there. Hopefully nobody's getting a divorce. I don't I don't want to have any more of my friends call me telling me they're getting a divorce. But if you do, those are questions to ask. So I know in your field, you have to deal with emotionally charged situations. And you came from a situation that you might be reminded of traumatic experiences dealing with your work. How do you balance that? How do you balance emotionally charged situations that remind you of the past and still keep a solid balance in your life?
That's a great question. And I think I have done so much work on myself. That was one of the things that when I was coming out of the divorce, again, it was either I can be a victim of my circumstances, or I can take the bull by the reins and kick it. And that's what I
Mhm.
decided to do. And I move forward and I let go a lot of the past. So I can't think of anything, within, let's even say, the past 5 years. I can't think of anything where it was a triggering event for me. I think a lot of times I hear things and I can understand what somebody's going through, but it's not necessarily triggering. And I think that's
Mhm.
only because I've done so much work. I know that there are some things that, and we have it set up in our firm. We do have a we call her a high conflict relationship coach, who has been able to even work. She's not a therapist, but she's been able to work even with some of our team when they do hit a situation that is kind of triggering to them. And we
Mhm.
don't keep them, on a case where they might be struggling, because that's not what's best for the client.
Right.
But I think for me, when I hear things that I've been through before, or that I do understand, it brings a sense of awareness, not only for what they're going through, but also part of our job here is not just to get them a legal result. It's to
Mhm.
start putting them on a path in their life that puts them in a position that when they're done with us, when through this, that legal paper, regardless of what it says, means crap. They're going to take control of their life and they're
Right.
going to change it. And that's, getting them to think about not being a victim, rising above. What can we do to set up boundaries so you're not
Mhm.
ending up in the same situation? Those are all things that I take as a responsibility within, our firm as a lawyer. It's not just law. There's so much else that goes into the divorce process, and that's what we're trying to create within our firm, is a life change.
I love that. Lifestyle change. I love that. I think that's so very, very important just when you're helping people uh, change their life. I'm a fitness person. Now, I'm not gonna get into specific because there are some people that follow me. They don't need to know exactly what I do. And building people up, helping them lose weight mentally, emotionally, improving their well-being. And I always tell people, hey, this is a lifestyle change. I'm teaching you something that you can carry on when I'm gone. And
Mhm.
that's beautiful to hear that it's not a end result, right, for you and your law firm. It is, we want to prepare you for the rest of your life. I love that. I really do love that. So, in speaking in that, and we don't have to give any names, right? But in speaking of that, do you have a success story of somebody who left a pretty traumatic relationship and is thriving after it through the help of you and your law firm?
I think one story comes to mind, and it's not what I would think of as the story to give away, for that, because, well, let me just tell it and then you can
Okay.
decide.
Okay.
And it's one of my favorite cases, because it was the first time I saw what I believe didn't work. And so this man hired me. He was a dad, and he was up on attempted murder charges because he had caught his wife, cheating on him, and he had
Oh,
gone after the guy that she was with.
oh,
So
okay.
so he's up, he's very angry. During the period of time, of course, she got a restraining order on him. He was kicked out of the house. During this period of time, there was a lot of damage done for the kids, in their relationship with
Yeah.
their dad and how they saw him. And when he came to me, he was so angry. He was angry at the guy. He was angry at his wife. He was angry at the world. He was angry at everyone. And I remember looking at him and go, not saying names, I said, the only way I'm going to work with you is if you take some responsibility for what you did here and you
Mhm.
work on changing that. And
Mhm.
he had to, because of the criminal charges, he had to go through, we have bad arts programs around here. So he had to go through that. And he promised me during that meeting, he said, I will do everything that I can. And he got involved with a personal therapist. It was funny because at one point he was calling me so frequently, just not even to talk about law, but just to talk about like how he was struggling and how to come out of that. And I was like, your therapist is way cheaper than me. And he was like, yeah, but I feel like I actually get more from you. And I was like, all right, as long as you know you're paying for it. But there was such a progression in his how he saw things, how he perceived things, how he could react, where at the very beginning in the case where he did not see his kids, she would have just pushed his button a little wrong and he would have blown up.
Mhm.
By the end of the case, we walked away with sole legal and physical custody of the children. She was
Wow.
kicked out of the house. He got the house. He kept all his retirement. She had to pay me attorney fees. It was this
Wow.
complete change, by the time we actually went to trial. And he walked away with everything. His kids, again, I don't want to get into details, but they're all doing really, really well. They don't really have a relationship with their mom,
Mhm.
unfortunately, any longer. But I've followed that family, and
Mhm.
that, yeah, I could sit here and be like, yeah, I got him the kids, I got him the house. But if he did not do the work, he never would have been in the situation to be able to have the doors open for him to take that. And that's where I feel that what you do for yourself and how you change yourself goes so closely hand in hand with your
Yeah.
legal, issue,
Mhm.
where I could be the best. I mean, I think I'm a pretty good lawyer, but I could be the best
Sounds like
lawyer
it.
in the world. If he was still that man that first came to me, there's no way in hell we would have walked away with that result. That was because of him and his willingness to change and do the work that needed to be done. And that's why I feel so strongly about a legal result as a piece of paper that's not only going to get you what you think you want. It's really the entire process that can get you what you want.
Wow, that is a really good story because the way it started off, I was like, is this the basis of a music video? Like, I think I've seen this music video before." That's the way that started off. Wow, but that's really good that he turned himself around and yeah, wow. I wasn't expecting that.
No, like I said, and it's not what you'd think of, of your typical domestic violence survivor, that rises above. But that, I think, is one of the most dramatic stories where I've seen such a shift. And the result that we walked away with because of that shift, like, I don't know if I'll ever have another case that beats that, but we'll see, because I'm in the business of changing life here.
I like that, but I got a question. So, in that scenario, wasn't he the domestic abuser?
So it wasn't that there was any abuse in regards to his children or his wife. He was definitely wrong within that scenario.
Mhm.
A lot of allegations were made after the fact that we were able to successfully refute. But that's part of, the issue where mom took a corner where she just couldn't really come back from it.
Mhm.
So in that particular situation, unfortunately, he let the situation get the best of him. But I also understand if catch your spouse cheating on you,
Look,
you might be a
yeah.
little angry. Do I think you should go attack them? No, but I get it.
Well, he didn't attack her. He attacked
He
him.
attacked him.
He attacked him. So, look, I want to be so messy right now. I want to be so messy. All right, I just got one more question about that scenario.
Okay.
Did the two guys know each other? Is that the
No,
reason why he attacked them?
no.
Okay, all right, okay. That would spark a little bit more anger out of me. But let me move on past this. Let me not keep getting messy. What do you hope to achieve in your work aside from helping people improve their lives after the fact? Um, and do you think there needs to be any changes in the legal system of how we deal with family, domestic abuse, divorce, all of that?
I mean, that is a very loaded question because yes, I think
It
the entire
was.
system needs to be changed. Like the process sucks. And there's definitely times where, as a lawyer, I'm part of the system. And there's some times where it works beautifully and I feel like justice has been accomplished. And there's other times I walk away and I go, what am I doing? I'm just part of the problem.
Mhm,
It's just this reoccurring injustice in this, so-called justice system
mhm.
where there's so many things wrong, and I think that becomes incredibly frustrating as an attorney because we can't necessarily change that. Do I have plans to eventually, get in there and have my voice heard of what needs to be changed? Hell yeah. But but, but
For
it's kind of that's part of the big vision of where my firm is going.
for all the people that are just listening to the audio and not watching the video, the way Heather said that, do I have plans of getting it? It was a lot of spice. There was a lot going on there, and I love every piece of it. I love absolutely all of that. And look, let me tell you something. If I was in Massachusetts and you decided to run for office, you had my vote because
Oh,
I
thank you.
I believe in the law in which you're practicing. I believe that that's the way it should be because you were right at the top of the interview. There's this misconception, there's a stereotype. And sometimes stereotypes fit, but there's a stereotype that all lawyers are shysters, like all
Mhm.
politicians are shysters. And that's absolutely not the case. So it's fantastic to have a lawyer on here to disprove those poor stereotypes or
Well, I
negative
appreciate that
stereotypes.
because we've gotten some one-star Google reviews from people. We do have a pretty strict process of who we allow to retain us. And
Mhm.
we've gotten some one stars from either people that we've had to get rid of because we've figured throughout the process that they're really the problem, or we haven't allowed them to hire us and they're very angry at that. so
Yeah,
so
haters.
it's kind of the price you pay for having standards.
They're haters. So, Heather, is there any final advice that you want to give people out there that are going through a tough marriage, possibly thinking about getting a divorce, uh, or just they don't know if they can get out of their marriage for financial or emotional reasons? Do you have any parting words of wisdom to guide them to the right decision for them?
Mhm. I think that I still believe in marriage. I did end up 3 years and almost 4 years ago now. I did get remarried after swearing it off for over 15 years. I
Okay.
do believe in marriage, and I think that's something not to throw away easily.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of people that will call us and they'll say, how do I know when it's time to file a divorce? And that's not a question. Any lawyer should, if a lawyer says yes, you should file for a divorce, they're probably not the best lawyer. That's a personal question.
Mhm.
However, there's certain things that are very, very difficult to come back from. Can you come back from a domestic, violence relationship? Yes. Can you come back from a cheating relationship? Yes. But only if the other person is completely willing to do the work for them. And that is not
Mm.
something you can make them do. So if they're not willing to do the work to change how they are and how they treat you, then it's not going to work. And to figure that out, I am a huge advocate of therapy. I am a huge advocate of getting in and talking about, because a lot of times, especially in domestic violence situations, you've been beat down. I
Mm-hmm.
remember speaking with my therapist, and I was like, I just don't even know who I am. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know anything about me. I've just done everything I could to make everyone else happy and peaceful. And she even said, well, let's start with some basics. What's your favorite kind of pizza? And I was like, I don't know. It's whatever everybody wants to eat. Like, I'll just order that. And even coming to the realization that I didn't even know what type of food I preferred
Hmm.
was almost this eye opener for me, where I said, and I'm a pretty, self-asserted person, and I've been that way my whole life, but I lost that. I
Right.
lost that completely. So even before you start the process, find somebody, and not the therapist that you see on TV where you lie on the couch and you just talk about your problems. The people who really dive down deep and get you to talk about, what it is that you believe in, why you believe it, what you can do to change it, how are you going to build yourself back up. It can
Mm-hmm.
be very uncomfortable at times. And if you have a therapist you're never uncomfortable with, you are not with the right therapist. So
Hmm.
I think sometimes doing that ahead of time and building yourself up, because divorce is not an easy process. And especially if you're coming against somebody who, for sake of the situation, they've had the upper hand. They know what to say to make you do certain things. They know how to terrify you. They know exactly what to do, how to say it, when to say it.
Mm-hmm.
That's this is like David and Goliath. You're going up against a giant when you're going through that divorce process. So building yourself up so that you're ready to go through it and you don't crumble is so important, because unfortunately I've seen that happen as well, where one person just gives in because they can't keep fighting. So I think for anyone who's in that situation, find a really, really awesome therapist, somebody who you like, but knows how to make you uncomfortable, because that's where growth comes from.
Whew. Wow. You hear that, ladies and gentlemen? That was powerful. That was real. That was powerful. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Heather O'Connor, not only a former professional skater, not only a mother, not only a kick-ass lawyer, but also, once again, a grandmother.
That's true.
I want to thank you for this interview. This was really insightful. I think I definitely learned a lot. I know my listeners will learn a lot as well. And some people have some things I'm not saying anything directly to anybody. I'm just saying some people have some things to think about. But thank you. Thank you so much for this interview.
No, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on and letting me share a little bit of my story.
Absolutely. It was my honor.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Unsolicited Perspectives with Bruce Anthony. Please subscribe, like, comment, share, and donate. Donations help us keep giving you this free content each and every week. Until next time, out at 5,000. Peace.
Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame. The cycle stays the same. Freedom over fame. Freedom over fame.